My name is Deborah Schaefer-Seaman. I am Prisma's Director of Network Weaving. It's my honor to be hosting today's webinar, Going Virtual, Crowdsourcing and Lessons Learned from SAR. Today is March 9th, 2020. It is 12 noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. It is also Ta'anit Esther, the fast of Esther, right before our Jewish holiday of Purim, and we welcome you all. On today's call, we have just about 150 participants. Of those, about a third are technology professionals, about a bit more than a half are educators, and the rest are joining us from all around North America to learn what all of us have to teach today around preventing the spread of coronavirus and shifting our schools to virtual sources of learning. Welcome everyone. It's truly a pleasure to be with you all today. We wish you tremendous strength as we move forward. I'm going to pass the mic over to Paul Bernstein now.
Thank you. Thank you, Deborah, for the introduction and for all of your work. My name is Paul Bernstein. I'm the CEO of Prisma, and I want to personally and on behalf of the entire Prisma staff and board thank each of you and all of your colleagues for your work this past week and always. What we've been doing is following the incredible efforts across the field of everyone who is supporting schools and communities responding to the coronavirus outbreak, seeing resources and the information spreading across the field, and we're seeing partnering going on within schools and beyond to disseminate expertise with virtual teaching and learning. It's so inspiring to see all of that. And we know that if you like, the normal work of your schools continues as much as possible as well. At Prisma, we admire how school leaders go above and beyond when called to do so, and we greatly appreciate your dedication, your tireless focus on helping your students, your communities, and of course, the entire Jewish day school field by being here. Our thoughts, our prayers, and our best wishes go out to all of those who may be unwell, and we wish them refuah shlema, as well as those who are affected directly and indirectly by the virus now and in the coming days. From a Prisma point of view, we've been trying to do our best efforts to support all of our educational leaders and monitoring the rapidly evolving coronavirus outbreak. We've actually been approaching the coronavirus work in 6 ways and would always be open to ideas for other things that we can do to support you. We have been first curating and disseminating critical information to school leaders. Second, serving as the network for sharing of information between school leaders, because it is that sharing that I think is extraordinarily valuable, and of course why we are all here right now. Third, we're identifying and addressing the common questions that day school leaders are currently facing. Fourth, we're serving as a point of contact with North American leaders in infectious disease, including the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in the US and the US Department of Health and Human Services, and we're curating resources from Canadian leading experts who are guiding the schools in Canada. The fifth point is we're negotiating discounts and trying to arrange field-wide learning opportunities like this call with virtual learning providers and schools are doing. And sixth, we want to support local Federation of Boards of Jewish Education to craft unified community messaging. We will continue to be proactive in supporting the day school field as news and information develops. We welcome suggestions and ideas. We are delighted to see the sharing that's going on between schools. And I want to say a special thank you and kol hakavod to each school that has been taking action so far, and to the SAR community who really have been exemplars for all of us in the sharing of information with the community, in responding, and of course, particularly in creating an extraordinary virtual learning environment. So thank you. I just want to wish everyone on this call and all of our students, families, staff, faculty, and all of our communities a happy and healthy Purim. And Deborah, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul Bernstein, CEO of Prisma. I'm always intrigued by the comment in the Yerushalmi, in the Jerusalem Talmud, which talks about the holiday of Purim, the Megillah itself, the book that we read on Purim, as the holiday and the book that will last beyond the end of time. So when the next world comes and all of our writings are no longer necessary, the Megillah itself and the holiday of Purim itself are two that will stay with us. So while most other Jewish texts will become irrelevant, as it were, the book of Esther will remain with us forever. The Rambam keeps that idea alive in the Mishnah Torah. And I wonder often, why Purim? Of all of the holidays, why the book of Esther? Of all the Jewish writings, why would those endure till the end of time? And my sense is that one of the central underlying themes of the book of Esther is really about identifying and acting on an individual's personal responsibility towards the community. That when we look at Esther and Mordecai, when we look at the hero, so to speak, and heroine of the book of Esther, we find individuals whose storylines really unfold along their ability to identify both their personal role in the destiny of the nation and act upon them. So that the seeming hiddenness of God in the reading of the verses amplifies the power of each and every person to effect change. And that centrality of moral agency in the book of Esther is really profound. To make change, to engage the community, to serve as a moral compass, and identify threads of goodness in the world, to use that moral agency to really strengthen the world. It was Mordecai and Esther's openness to identify their own personal responsibility towards the whole and to listen to their moral centers, to act upon that which they knew to be true in the world, and to bring the entire community in as a part of that transformation that allowed the powerful decree to be overturned. As we welcome Rabbi Avi Bloom to speak with us this morning, I want to invite all of us to see ourselves as agents of change. Yes, something happened which has overturned our world, quite literally. This was not expected in any way, shape, or form. It has completely changed the way that we do business in our schools and has for the past week or two. And yet, here we are, each and every one of us, strengthening, inviting, growing through the process. And Rabbi Avi Bloom is really here as the Director of Technology of the SAR High School. He'll start in his professional capacity. He works from the high school perspective. He'll also speak to a broader range of learners, but please understand that he is speaking as a professional working from the high school perspective. I will pass the mic over to Rabbi Bloom, and following his comments, we will open for Q&A. Rabbi Avi Bloom, passing the mic over to you. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much, Paul. My deep gratitude to the entire Prisma team for all that you are doing as we move along in this horrific situation that nobody would have ever hoped for, and we try to make the most of it. I want to just open by mentioning and focusing us a little bit on what is really most important here, which is the health of each and every one of us and each and every one of our families and the families of the schools in which we have the privilege to play a role, and everybody in our community. And as we deal with it very much on the ground in real time, as we speak, we have positive coronavirus tests in our community, adults and children. And foremost on my mind and our minds, I hope, is praying for them and their health and their families. And I'm hopeful, what keeps pushing me forward is the hope that the learning that we will all be doing and be supporting and be creating in our schools will hopefully serve as a merit for them and for all of Klal Yisrael and everyone around the world who is struggling and suffering in the current emergency. I want to also express gratitude to my administration at SAR. Everything that we're about to talk about and that you're going to hear about is a tribute to the environment that they created, to the forethought they had in planning and preparing for this, and creating an environment where we can actually be successful or try to be successful and implement all sorts of different learning strategies and models to try to meet the needs of our families and our learners. And I have to mention, and I know many on this call have reached out, and it's been really great to hear from everybody, and I apologize if I haven't gotten back to you directly. I wish I could have hours of coffee with everyone on this call, but I have to mention, and many of you on this call know them, the technology team that I lead at SAR High School, Matthew Scheinberg, Josh Lewis, and Mendel Gottesman need to be mentioned by name. They have been working around the clock since last Tuesday at 6:15 in the morning. And there's nothing that I could do or lead without them. And if you encounter them or speak to them or write to them, they deserve all of the credit in the world for what we're creating at the high school. And by extension, Caleb Fitzsimmons, Becca Glassberg, and everybody who's working in SAR Academy. If you know them, reach out to them, send them a note. It's a really intense time, and those little notes and messages are extraordinarily meaningful and helpful. What I'd like to do over the next 25 to 30 minutes, or maybe a little less if we can, I know there's a lot of questions out there, is give folks a general sense of the process and the timeline that we've gone through since last Tuesday and a little bit before. Tell you some data and some stories that are inspiring to me, and I hope will be inspiring to you, about the types of learning environments and communal events that we've been able to create and craft. And I'm sure you've seen some of them on social media and passed around in a couple of news pieces that have gone out. If you haven't yet, take a look, because it will push you forward to try to do some great stuff. I have some tips and guidance for some admins who are on the call. I know we have a split on the call between school administrators and tech folks. And gosh, if there's any partnership in a school that could be more important than that, I can't think of it. So that's a critical piece of this, is the admin tech folks relationship. I have some guidance and tips that I think can help some of the school administrators on the call, and some guidance and tips that I can try to give directly for the folks working in the tech departments or managing the tech and more technical pieces of what you are going to be doing or possibly doing in your schools. And then we will certainly open it up for Q&A at the end. Deborah and Mark, please keep an eye on the clock. So here we go. Last Tuesday morning at 6:15 in the morning, I awoke to a text message from my principal. That does not happen ever. Saying, "Are you up?" And I knew exactly right away what was going on. I called him back at about 6:20, and he said, "We're going to be likely closing today. It seems we have a positive coronavirus situation in our community." And from then forward, basically, nonstop, thank God for Shabbat, nonstop since Tuesday morning, we have been working to put this plan into action and get as much learning and connecting and meaningful experience out there for all of the members of our community. And that's an important thing to highlight. Students, parents, families, grandparents, friends, those afflicted, those who know people who are affected, those in the hospital, those in quarantine, and trying to reach as many of those people as possible, as much as we can, and creating what I hope are meaningful opportunities to learn, connect, experience all of the different things that we do in our school, and many things, to be quite honest, that we actually don't have the opportunity to do during a regular school day. And that has been one of the most inspiring pieces of this. And I'll highlight them in a little bit when I tell you some of the stories of things that have happened this week. But our general process, we put the plan into action Tuesday morning. When I tell you I give credit to my administration, I would say the timeline is a little fuzzy right now because we're deep in this, but I would say around the Thursday preceding last Tuesday. So that would be going back just about a week and a half. John Kroll, one of our principals, we sat down together and he looked me square in the eye and said, I think this could be real. I think this could be real. And we need to have every possible plan and contingency in place to be able to do remote learning and pivot in an instant. And turns out he was right. He and I both looked at each other like, really? And I certainly had my doubts. Never in my wildest imagination would I ever have thought that we'd be doing this within 4 days of that conversation. And I give him all the credit in the world for prioritizing it as a conversation. And I could say kind of guidance piece number one for administrators who have in their charge making sure that schools are set up for this is take it seriously. It is real and it happens in an absolute blink of an eye. So that Thursday, John sat me down and we developed a plan. We decided we were going to use Zoom right away. We decided we were going to use, I know many people have questions about platforms. It was unequivocal. There was no question in my mind that we were going to use Zoom. And there was no question in my mind, and thank God we are blessed with the resources to do this, that we were going to give, we decided on that spot to give every single teacher in the high school a Zoom licensed account. It used to be called a pro account. It's now called a licensed account. I would say that decision, or those two decisions, were pivotal, were probably the two key decisions we made that were able to springboard us into a place where we could really move this forward. And we set up a plan where we had everybody ready to go in the high school. We hadn't yet invited them, but we knew what we were going to do. I ordered 125 headsets from Amazon. Of course, they arrived on Tuesday after the building was already empty. We have since figured out a way to distribute most of those to our faculty members. And we knew as of that Thursday morning, I think it was Thursday, Wednesday, Friday, sometime at the end of the previous week, that we were going to put Zoom into action with pro accounts for every one of our faculty. And I started drafting documents, and I hope to be able to share later today or tomorrow through Prisma some documentation that we sent out to our faculty about how to accept our Zoom invitation. And I'll talk about that in the text section, how to set up their accounts and how to begin working. So Tuesday morning, we got the call. We put the Zoom plan into action. On Tuesday, the school decided, I think very smartly, to treat the first day off as a traditional, you can call it traditional snow day. Sometimes in SAR on snow days, we have 1 or 2 classes or shiurim that are offered to anybody who wants to join. We've done that remotely on Zoom for some time already. Usually the first snow day of the year is a pretty light one, where we go the route of snow day, enjoy. And so Tuesday was a pretty light day of learning for students, but it was a pretty intense day of getting things into action. So on Tuesday, our administration, our department chairs, our operations folks sat down and devised a schedule for learning beginning on Wednesday. Our tech team set out to create those Zoom accounts that we were all ready to go. We licensed every single teacher. We sent out very specific instructions about how to get things rolling. And by Tuesday afternoon and evening, we were doing one-on-one Zoom testing offered to every single faculty member in the high school, which was a key ingredient in making this work. Teachers need to feel supported. They need to feel like they have a chance to figure out how this is going to work before there are students in the room. And if there's any guidance that I could give everyone on the call, it would be to not set teachers up in any way where they could feel like the first one was a failure and are afraid to try it again. It's much more important to start slowly, give people an opportunity to learn whatever platform it is you choose to use, and allow them to test it, test it, test it, test it. And I can tell you in Zoom alone, there are dozens, literally dozens of settings that admins have, whoever has the admin dashboard for all of the school accounts, that people leading meetings have, both within the meeting and in advance of the meeting, and things to do all along the way to set this up for success. And it is critical that we not just pick a platform and hand it off to teachers and say, hey, go create a Zoom account, go open your Google Hangouts, go do Microsoft Teams, and then assume that that is going to work. That really is a key first step in the process. So Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening, deep into the night, we did a lot of one-on-one Zoom training sessions with our faculty. There were multiple, I can't remember the exact timeline, but all throughout this process, we have had faculty meetings and department chair meetings on Zoom on a regular basis, way more frequently than we have them in school. I obviously, and the tech team have been in constant communication. We have Zoom meetings at least once a day, usually more. And the entire faculty and what our administration was able to create was really a sense of within the faculty where everyone was on board. There was a clear plan that was communicated effectively with sensitivity to the variety of situations that people are in. Whether it was quarantine, we've gone through different phases where certain members of families have been quarantined and not others. And then there was a change over this weekend, and then there was another change over this weekend. And so there needs to be a flexibility built into that schedule that can somehow account for that. One of the things that we're doing well, I think, in the high school is allowing teachers to try to express times in the day that work better or worse for them to teach. And to every degree possible, craft a schedule that works. So there are folks who don't have childcare at home one half of the day, but might have the other half. And it's a fluid situation. There are people whose offices want them to come in. There are people whose offices don't want them to come in. And so to the degree that there can be flexibility there for the people who were asking to do this work, I think it makes a massive difference. So Tuesday night, we did training. We had faculty meetings. There was at least one faculty meeting, maybe two, before the online learning really kicked into gear. And there was certainly a sense among the faculty that we're doing this. Everybody was in, everybody was all in, and there are plenty of people who we would all agree we could never have imagined would be teaching classes on Zoom. They would tell you that. It was pretty clear and it was remarkable. And some of those folks have actually had the most positive of experiences, recreating what they do.
Avi, what was the technical training that you gave those teachers during those faculty meetings? Just give us like a quick 1, 2, 3. Here are the technology tips we gave those teachers during that pre-meeting.
Sure. So there's a hierarchy, I would say, of settings of importance in terms of making Zoom work effectively. So we showed the most important thing, I would say, is that we were able to show teachers how to make sure that students get into the right meetings. I guess I'll flip-flop a little here, Deborah, because you asked, and we'll do a little bit of the technical stuff now. So basically, every single teacher had a Zoom licensed account, which meant that on the back end, if you have there needs to be someone in the school who's an admin on the Zoom dashboard. I do not think it's advisable to have individuals go create their own Zoom accounts for a variety of reasons. And once you have a Zoom dashboard set up, you can set up accounts for every single person that you decide that you need to pay for and license. There are great virtues also of the basic account that you don't have to pay for, but also some pretty serious limitations. And Zoom is making changes as we speak to the plans that they're rolling out. So we opened up for faculty. In the faculty-wide meetings, I shared with them some key, every single faculty meeting in the past week, I have shared with them key takeaways in terms of making Zoom work and making it work better from all of my individual conversations with teachers. So some of the key elements are understanding how the Zoom link works. We are using personal meeting IDs. we are encouraging people not to create additional meetings. So we have a central list in the dashboard that we can export of every single teacher's personal meeting ID. Our primary LMS right now is Google Classroom. Every teacher has posted his or her link and meeting ID, and that's important, and I'll tell you why in a second, in Google Classroom. And students always know where to go when that teacher is teaching a class. So number one was how to manage your account, know what your meeting ID and link are, and how to make sure that students have those correctly. And then there are a lot of settings that we have been working on within the meetings themselves to set them up for success. Some of the key things include how to manage the participants in a meeting, how to mute all, how to unmute all, how to allow folks to unmute themselves, how to not allow folks to unmute themselves, as we've set up here. What it means to be a host, what it means to co-host a meeting, which is a key piece, especially in large meetings, that multiple people can have hosting controls, how to share your screen, how to pass through a video and audio from your computer onto students, how to run breakout rooms, how to set up waiting rooms so you can go into a meeting and set up your settings before folks can come into the meeting, how to set up recordings for folks who may not be able to join under a variety of different circumstances, how to spotlight video on certain students, how to take polls, how to annotate screen shares. I know I'm going quickly, Deborah.
No, Avi, this is great. This is exactly what we're looking for.
Okay, how to annotate screen sharing, how to stop people from annotating screen sharing. I don't need to tell you the stories you can imagine in a high school scenario, what might happen to a meeting where anybody can share his or her screen or annotate over what anybody else is sharing on the screen. And so any one of these settings can make a massive, massive difference in the success of the meeting. How to lock a meeting so that other people can't come in if the link gets shared. How to turn on your video, how to turn off your video. We are pressing strongly to have all students keep their video on while they are in meetings. The teachers feel strongly it creates a much nicer, warmer environment and possibility for conversation and engagement. Our administration is talking very candidly with students about their position and posture as they approach their learning. At the beginning, there were a lot of kids laying in bed in hooded sweatshirts, and there's really been a message to the students to take this seriously, that this learning matters, that it counts. And a lot of people have been asking me about accountability for learning. And in our high school situation, which is slightly different from our lower and middle school situation, the message to students right now is that this learning matters, that they are accountable, that it's part of the curriculum, and that we're going to just pick things up, hopefully when we get back into school soon. The lower and middle school, I think, for a variety of reasons, are a little different in that regard. But
Avi, I'm just going to use this opportunity to remind everyone that we are recording this webinar, and you will have very copious notes from this webinar. We'll share out everything that Avi's saying at the end of this webinar. Would you do me a favor and zoom out for 1 minute and share with everyone what learning looks like at SAR? Are you synchronous? Are you asynchronous? How many of your classes taking? Are all of your teachers teaching or only some of them? Is it all live teaching? Are you using videos? Just give us a bit of a framework about what the teaching.
Great. So right now, what has been happening predominantly, and this was a strategic decision, is synchronous learning through Zoom. That takes a lot of different forms, but the classes that students are accountable to attend right now are synchronous learning Zoom sessions where teachers are doing a variety of things. So teachers might convene the group, but then send students off to breakout rooms to go do work and then convene as they might in a regular class. They may meet for 5 minutes, be sent off to do some work and come back in. What I think might happen or will happen, and what we're preparing for as this situation continues to march on, is that more and more strategies are going to be necessary to continue to keep up the level of engagement and meet teacher and student needs. So, for example, we put a new policy and practice into place beginning today for teacher and student one-on-one meetings and guidelines for how those are supposed to happen. There are research papers that kids are writing. There are all sorts of things that teachers would like to be able to talk about with kids. And so we put a framework into place to manage that. Our guidance team has a framework in place for how they can meet with students and parents, whether it's people who they meet with on a regular basis anyway, or people who are reaching out and want specifically to talk to folks in the guidance department. And so as it evolves, it's kind of a moving target, Deborah, as more pieces of the school start to move into this world. There's a lot of conversation now about our assessment calendar, and will we begin to try to do summative assessments remotely. There's a lot of conversation about other things that were happening in the coming weeks, and how that is going to take shape. But certainly, the more time this goes on, the more varied strategies I think are out there, and it's really important to empower teachers to be thoughtful about this and craft a classroom online that will work for them. There are many people who are very comfortable. We have many teachers who want a mute all button installed in their classrooms now. They love it. And there are many people who feel a little more uncomfortable talking in a setting like this and would rather do more student-centered work. And I think it's critical to support all of that. But the short answer to your question is it's been primarily synchronous learning through Zoom. In our lower and middle school, particularly in the lower school, that has taken a very different form. And I can tell you, I am blessed, thank God, with children in 3rd grade and in kindergarten, and a little baby who is actually not in quarantine right now. That has taken different form in different grades. In the lower grades, there's a lot of asynchronous stuff, some powerful YouTube videos, different kinds of resources that are being sent out, book reading, all sorts of chugim and activities. I mean, right before this, I went out to the dining room table, and my son was watching a live video of the person who tends our garden. We have a roof garden in the Early Learning Center, and he was doing a live walkthrough of what's growing in the garden and what's starting to bud as the weather gets nicer. And so it has taken a lot of different forms throughout the institution. I want to speak for a moment also about the schedule we created in the high school.
Thank you.
We are not running a full school day schedule. We normally have 10, 11 periods in a day, like many of you, from 8 a.m. till 5:10. We are running on a modified schedule that has about 5 periods in a day, 2 before a lunch break, and then 2 or 3 after a lunch break. Slightly longer than regular periods. We normally run, given any day, 38 to 41-minute periods. We're running 45-minute sessions to give people a couple of minutes to get in and get out. And there's a special schedule being crafted every single day, first run by our department chairs and then formalized and distributed to faculty and students to account for a variety of different factors: teacher availability, curriculum, all sorts of choices that are going into who is teaching whom when, and making sure that there's no overlap in that. And from an attendance standpoint, obviously we aren't using our standard regular attendance procedures, but there is attendance being taken in every single Zoom meeting, and faculty are keeping track of who is where, when. I could talk a lot. I mean, Deborah, I think that's a pretty good overview. I'll come back to some of the technical pieces about how to get it set up in a moment. Before we go too far in, I definitely want to share just some data and some stories of some of the remarkable things that have happened this week, because I think that they really are the inspiration that keeps us rolling.
While you're framing it that way, would you also mention any challenges that you faced and how you've overcome them?
Sure. I'll do that first. There can be extraordinary challenges along the way. You are relying on, in any kind of remote learning, especially of the synchronous variety, you are relying on whatever people have in their homes to be able to do this. Especially under conditions of quarantine, we had a number of faculty who left devices in their offices. We had lots of folks who didn't have enough, not particularly in the high school, and I'll tell you why in a moment. In our lower grades, there was a strong consideration for how many devices people have at home. And how many kids are we asking to use those devices at the same time? And I think there's a lot of thinking that needs to go into the schedule that's created and what we're actually asking people to do at home. At the beginning, some of the lower school meetings People had some trouble accessing because they were sharing it via the URL, the link, as opposed to also publishing the ID of the meeting. So the parent is reading the email with the link on one device and trying to access the Zoom meeting on the other device, and they open Zoom and it says, "What's your meeting ID?" And they had to go to the link and pull out the meeting ID and put it into Zoom. So there are little things like that that I think need to be accounted for. There are challenges in terms of what's happening for families right now. Quarantine is a stressor on families, and people are having to support lots of kids doing lots of learning. It's also been a great blessing for lots of families, and that's a great piece of feedback we've gotten. We've created a structure and a routine through the quarantine process that has brought people together and really allowed for great things to happen. Some of the other challenges, as I talk more, will come up, but I really think that the preparation and testing will mitigate many of the challenges. One of the challenges is a communication challenge, I would say, and it's important to have in place as part of your process, how is communication going to work when folks are out of school? How is the admin team going to speak with each other? How are the department chairs going to speak with each other? Who is communicating with the tech team? What events and what rooms or classes are happening through the technology team or some kind of central command, let's call it, as opposed to people just creating their own meetings. When we created large events and did those online, we had to be very careful. Last Wednesday night, we had a 700-person meeting for all parents in the school. It was open to all parents in the school. We had 700 families participate on Zoom. That could have very easily gone sour if we had people unmuting their mics, or if people didn't necessarily have the right link, or if we didn't have the license on that one account to allow for a large meeting up to 1,000. And so managing all of those different technical pieces requires really laser focus on the variety of settings and the variety of options, and making sure you get them right. And the only way to do it is testing and preparation. In terms of some fascinating stories, the life of the school goes on, and the life of the community goes on, and in my opinion, needs to continue to go on to the best degree possible. And so, when there are fewer people quarantined, people can get together in person and Zoom people in. And when everybody's quarantined, nobody's getting together in person. So we had bar mitzvahs scheduled last week. We had a high school faculty member who was sitting Shiva in quarantine last week. And we set up one evening a Zoom for 45 minutes into his house. We had close to 50 students and faculty members in the Zoom together. And if I have a wonderful screenshot that I'll try to share with the Prisma folks of close to 50 people, and this faculty member was overwhelmed with the opportunity to have this kind of visit. He shared beautiful stories about his mom. He was able to screen share pictures of his family and his relatives and his extended family, and tell everybody there about the journey of his family and the story of his mom. And it was incredibly moving. And our principal, John Kroll, and I spoke right after that. And we said, you almost can't create that in school. It was quite remarkable to have students and faculty basically go on a Shiva call together remotely. And we were able to keep that going. He zoomed into shul, in our local shul here, to be able to try and say Kaddish during his week of Shiva. And there was lots of back and forth in the rabbinic world about how exactly that works. Conversation for another time. And there was a bar mitzvah scheduled for this past weekend. There's an 8th grader who was a 7th grader, 8th grader who was supposed to have a bar mitzvah in school before this past Shabbos, and Thursday morning he was home in quarantine, and we had a 200-person Zoom, and he was able to lane from his house on Thursday morning, and everybody was able to celebrate with him. We had Mishmar Thursday night in the high school, where we had some extra shiurim like we usually have on Thursday nights.
What's Mishmar and what's shiur?
We have extra, on Thursday evenings, there's often some extra Judaic studies classes that are to some degree optional, varied. It's an opportunity for students to learn together, to hear from different speakers, different teachers, as kind of a co-curricular learning opportunity. And we were able to recreate that Thursday evening. And Friday afternoon, before Shabbat, when all classes were over, and many of you may have seen this, there's a great clip on Facebook, but we did a tish, a traditional Jewish gathering around a table with spiritual words of Torah and singing. And we had a few hundred folks on Zoom singing in their homes with families arm in arm. You should find the post on Facebook. It was extraordinary. And then on Motzei Shabbat, right after Shabbat was over, we did an online Havdalah, and we had about 350 families, probably close to 1,000 people huddled around their computers in what was a pretty perilous moment. Saturday was the day of non-quarantine, actually, between last week's quarantine and the new quarantine that went into place on Sunday, and it was extraordinary. And so we were able to create community events that have really kind of highlighted the week. I know some people want statistics. I'm happy to just share them quickly with you. In our high school, since we have begun this, we have done a total of 916 Zoom meetings with a total of 15,040 participants. Now, people are counted twice, right? They're counted every meeting they're in, and over 417,000 meeting minutes, total time that people have spent in meetings. And the numbers are similar, a little lower for our academy for a variety of reasons, but it's over, almost 1 million total minutes and 2,000 meetings that have happened. And that spans the gamut from teachers meeting with 2 students to 700-person parent meetings and literally everything in between.
Super. Avi, thank you so much for sharing all of that information about the tremendous way that SAR has transitioned to going virtual. We're going to shift into some questions right now. Can you talk to us a little bit about the way that different divisions and different age groups are supporting their teachers and their learners? Are your younger students doing online lessons as much as your older students, synchronous versus asynchronous? Are all of your teachers using the same platforms? And if they feel more comfortable on a different platform, are they able to choose? Those kinds of things.
For synchronous learning, everything is really happening on Zoom. And I would absolutely encourage folks to try, to the degree you can, to create a unified shared experience around a particular platform. In terms of the support systems and how much learning is happening, the most kind of very clear, standardized schedule across the board is happening in the high school and the middle school. And as you get down into the lower grades, for a variety of reasons, there's lots of different staggering that's happening. So different grades have different sessions at different times. Pretty much everybody has tefillah in the morning, has prayers in the morning, some live on Zoom. So my 3rd grade daughter has had tefillah in the morning live on Zoom. My son in kindergarten has a video that was sent out of the davening, of the prayers that they do in their class, and he was able to watch that. And from my vantage point, that split made a lot of sense. In terms of the things that are happening, again, in the high school, it's happening mostly students with their regular teachers that teach them the subjects that they regularly teach them. In the lower grades, there's a variety. So there's some things that are happening with those classes with the regular classroom teachers, and there's a lot of specialty things. So there's some athletics and yoga things that happen to keep kids moving at home. There's reading happening through the library. There's other science things. I mentioned the garden earlier. And so there's a lot of specialty things being offered. There's a special program we do.
I'm sorry to interrupt. When you say specialty things like that reading, is that happening virtually or is that an assignment for the students?
I was referring to virtual learning, reading, both synchronous and asynchronous. So that could be happening over a Zoom or a YouTube video that the librarian may send out, reading a book to students. And every one of these things seems, from my vantage point, to create normalcy and routine for kids who are home in quarantine. And when they see their teachers, their faces light up. And when they see their friends, their faces light up. So I think there are multiple goals happening at the same time as we go through it.
Beautiful. And how long a day are you running for your elementary students?
I don't know as many details on the day in the elementary school. It seems that there are multiple slots throughout the day where things are happening, with some nice breaks in the middle. So my kids started this morning around 9 a.m. And it seemed like they were on and off until about 12 with 2 or 3 different things. And then there's a break and some things in the afternoon. Some things are bigger, some things are smaller. So today being the day before Purim, there was a live program that's being organized from Jerusalem that our school was planning to participate in. Instead of being live in school as part of that program, we're sending out a YouTube link for every one of our students to be able to watch that program remotely. There was a program in our lower school scheduled every day on this year called Power of Words, where a woman whose husband passed away and really had dedicated his life to speech and the power of words. They had a school-wide program planned for today. So they did a school-wide program on Zoom surrounding that. And that was a kind of a central focal point of the schedule. Tonight for Purim, we have Megillah reading, community-wide Megillah readings that are happening over Zoom. There's going to be some kind of faculty Purim spiel or whatever kind of jokes or skits would have happened in school will somehow happen virtually. There was a bat mitzvah scheduled for tomorrow morning. We're going to try to create a space for that. So I would say it runs the gamut. But in the high school, it's, I would say, kind of the most standardized type of schedule where students are meeting with their regular teachers at regular intervals.
Great. And how did you train the students, if at all?
Excellent question. That's a very popular question. I sent out some guidelines. Many of our students have used Zoom before. We do have an after-school learning program once a week or twice a week that used to meet. It now doesn't anymore, but used to meet one night a week remotely. And so many of our students have used Zoom for that or for something else. The key to the setup there was we are one-to-one devices for faculty and for students. And this is a key element. So every single student in our high school had an SAR owned and issued iPad that we manage. And every single faculty member has an SAR computer and iPad that we manage and set up. And so as part of our preparation, when we set out to do this on Zoom, one of the first things we did was we installed automatically the Zoom app on every single student's iPad. And we made it, we set our settings in Zoom so that students do not need credentials to be able to join meetings. So as long as a teacher shares the correct link, the student can join that meeting. If there's a fear that people will join other classes or other meetings, there are ways to account for that. And so we kind of knew for sure in the high school, with some additional guidelines that I sent out to students about how to manage themselves in meetings, from a technology standpoint, that was relatively smooth. In our lower school, it was a little more complicated. A lot of folks were having trouble with devices and how to make sure they had Zoom and the correct Zoom links. And over the past few days, we have started a Chromebook loaner program for families who need additional devices. And we've had about 150 devices go out to families to borrow for this process. And I have offered faculty and students the opportunity to continue to ask us questions and guidance. And I keep sharing with faculty who by extension share with students a number of tips and tricks to manage things inside the Zoom rooms.
Great. Talk to us a little bit about accountability, Avi. Do you have students submitting their work? What's the expectation on student participation in the younger and the older grades? Do they differ?
So in terms of what we would call traditional academic accountability, I would say the high school leans strongly in the direction of traditional academic accountability. There is a lot of care being taken to not overwhelm students with additional work at home. And so there are some guidelines in place about who can assign what types of assignments. It's mostly right now one-night assignments relating to what was taught on a particular day or being taught on a coming day. There is not this kind of sense that, oh, all the kids are just working at home, so we can all just give them work. and pile it on. So there's care being taken there, but there's also a very strong sense of accountability. And that actually calls into to the conversation, something that I haven't mentioned yet, which is our Student Learning Center. There are many, many, many students in our school who work with members of our Student Learning Center, learning specialists. And there is a lot happening through the Student Learning Center to make sure that those connections stay strong and that those students continue to get the support and guidance that they need remotely. So that's the high school side of it. I think as you get younger in grades, I think the degree and the type of accountability, I think, changes. And I think it might be fair to say, I don't want to overreach, but it might be fair to say loosens a little. And I think there's a strong focus on engagement. There's a strong focus on learning and teaching and having meaningful experiences. I don't have a very strong sense of what the academic accountability is going to look like there. It doesn't seem to me as a parent right now that the standard curriculum is really the priority as these Zoom sessions take form in the same way that it is in the high school. And a lot of that has to do with the life of the high school. We have a lot of externally imposed timelines that need to happen, particularly in things like AP courses and the like, where the calendar really is dictated to us.
Got it. Avi, a couple of really technical questions. Do you remember how much the licenses cost for each faculty member for Zoom?
Yeah, it's a great question. We are grandfathered into some old pricing from Zoom, which I shouldn't share here. But if anybody reaches out, I'm happy to talk you through it. But the key change here—
Avi, do you want people reaching out to you while you're on quarantine and your school is being quarantined for the next week?
with an understanding that my reply will not be as immediate as it usually is.
Okay, great. Can you give us the range of cost of licenses for each faculty member?
Yeah, I'll tell you the key. Now, Zoom is changing this as we speak. So a number of people on the call who I've spoken to this week, Zoom has, for many schools, I haven't had a chance to speak with any of the executives at Zoom yet, but I will. Zoom has lifted the 40-minute limit, which is the #1 imposed limit on free accounts. They've lifted that for many, many schools. There are multiple consortium working on that. I know the New York City independent schools and New York State independent schools have put together something relating to that. And Zoom seems to be very flexible, not for planning schools, but for schools that are actually affected and closed. But that's okay, because you can set up your Zoom licenses as basic licenses and do all your training and all your setup, and then throw the pro licenses on there. You'll lose a few features along the way, but once it's there, it's there. The key ingredient is, because this is a temporary arrangement, I urge everybody to pay for Zoom monthly, even though it's slightly more expensive. When you buy your licenses, buy them on a monthly basis, as opposed to shelling out a lot of cash for a year when you may only need them for a few days or a few weeks. The problem with that is what Zoom is advertising is an education plan, which is about $1,800 for 20 licenses for a year. And they seem, from what I'm being told, to only let you pay annually for that. And so my guidance to schools right now is to not use that, is to actually use pro licenses. You don't need to go to business. Pro is plenty. And to pay for those pro licenses on a monthly basis. And so as soon as this is over, with God's help, you won't have to pay for more of it than you need to. I think the standard retail price for a Zoom Pro license is about $15 a month.
Super,
so
Avi, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that information. I'm gonna drop in just a few more questions before our hour is up. There are folks who are concerned that they won't be able to pre-distribute their devices before a potential school closure. I know that you were in a similar situation. How did you guys handle that?
So that's a great question. I would encourage faculty to take their devices home every day right now. And if students have one-to-one devices that go home with them, I would encourage them to take them home. For sure, just take them home daily.
Once the quarantine started at your school, was there ever a moment when certain people in the community were able to get to the school?
Great question. So the short answer is yes, but not always. So there were a couple of days where the building was completely locked until it was cleaned and disinfected, and they got official word from the health department about the virus on surfaces and other related questions. Since then, there have been multiple periods where the building has been open, and folks who are not quarantined have been allowed to go get stuff. We had many students who left fill-in in school. We had teachers who left computers in school. I needed my webcam to do this webinar. A friend of mine was able to get it for me this morning. There is the possibility, and you should have contingencies in place for who can go to the building in the event of a quarantine, but the building being open to get things. And to the degree that you can have things be out of the building or in multiple locations, that would be best.
Great. And how did you communicate with the parents all the information that they needed to know in order to help this process succeed?
Great. So we have an emergency communication plan as part of our school. So at 6:30 last Tuesday morning, every parent and every student got a text message that school was going to be closed. Some had already left to head to school. And since then, we've been using our regular communication portals that we always use in schools. So we have through our website, we have email templates. Folks have constant contact or the equivalent. I would say the vast majority of information that has gone out through regular email communications. Internally, we use Slack. So our tech team, many of our administrators, and many other folks in the school communicate internally on Slack. I encourage folks to have some kind of chat platform to help you get out of your email inboxes as much as possible. And so most of the communication with the community has come through regular email updates. And the more communication you can give, the better. There are lots of, our schools, it was caught for a little while in between New York City and New York State in terms of guidelines, and the communications basically said we're waiting for guidance, and even those communications are welcome. We also opened up a phone hotline where we, through the magic of Google Voice, we've been able to have a phone number ring 6 different parent volunteers at the same time, and that has been very, very, very welcome. So a number of folks are calling that hotline from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. We have doctors ready to call back if it's a medical question, and lots of folks ready to pass along information. And those are parent volunteers who are just fielding calls. It is important that people have an address to go to with questions or concerns that they have.
And just clarify for us, the types of calls that those volunteers are getting are homework help, medical questions, what to do about the quarantine, where to go to pick up my laptop? What's the range?
Everything except for homework. It's not meant for academic stuff. It's meant for everything else in the life of the school. Are we quarantined? Who's quarantined? Why are we quarantined? I want to talk to a doctor. I want to get a test. I want to know if there's a test. My uncle tested positive. What do I do? My kid I have kids in 2 different schools. One's open, one's closed. Can I send my other kid? All sorts of things like that.
Got it. Rabbi Avi Bloom, thank you for fielding so many questions today. We know that so many of you have more questions. On Friday, March 13th, we've created a room for heads of schools to crowdsource. It is a crowdsourcing Q&A for heads of schools on Friday, March 13th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern, 10 to 11 a.m. Pacific. We'll also have that same crowdsourcing Q&A for Judaic administrators on Thursday, March 12th from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern and 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific. Those Zoom rooms will be open to all heads of school and Judaic administrators. If you guys would like a tech person's Q&A room, I'll set it up for you with pleasure. I do see that question coming in. The goal here is for you guys to crowdsource just as you did all the way through this chat. With special thanks to Rabbi Avi Bloom, a quick note that he is quarantined and his school is quarantined. So even though Avi is generously offering that you reach out, I'll ask that you reach out to anyone else who might have the answers to your questions before you reach out to Avi. We will be sharing all the recording from this webinar, all of the notes from this webinar, and as much documentation and letters as Avi is able to share, we will share with you with pleasure. A reminder to everyone that Prisma has on our website resources regarding the prevention of spread and educational implications in the Knowledge Center of Prisma. A reminder that we have crowd-shared letters going out to all of the communities around North America. We're here for you any way that we can be. My email is deborahs@prisma.org. I'm Deborah Schaefer-Seaman, Prisma's Director of Network Weaving. Thanks for joining us today. Wishes for good health, good prevention, and a very happy Purim to all. Thanks, everyone.